Hi everybody, and welcome back to Tales of Wanderlust. I'm Cass, and if you want to join me on a hike up to Flatiron, then stay tuned. I am here at the Lost Dutchman State Park in Arizona. It's east of Phoenix, about 30-40 miles. And today I am hiking up to Flatiron. So this is at the top of the Superstition Mountains. It is about a 5.5 mile round trip. It's about 2,200 feet in elevation gain, if I remember correctly. And the nice part is the trail leaves right from the camp area. So I left Jasper and Napoleon in the RV. I have my Wi-Fi camera on them so I can keep an eye on them from out here. And I am heading up to the top of these mountains today. So hopefully the hike should take about 4 to 5 hours, which isn't too bad. It's about 74 degrees right now, and there is a breeze, which is really nice. The thing is, I haven't hiked in a while here, so I'm already starting to breathe heavy, and I'm not used to the sun either. So we're gonna see how far I get. We're gonna see if we make it to the top. There are a good amount of people on the trail, so you can kind of see people back in the background there. The nice thing when I'm hiking alone is I like to have other people on the trail, just in case I need anything, but it's also nice to just say hi to people as you walk and know you're not completely alone. Oh, there's cloud cover right now, so it's pretty nice. It might still look sunny in the camera, but there's actually a little bit of clouds here, which really helps with the sun and the heat. So I am glad we've got that for weather today. All right, taking the first break of the day. I took my hat off to let a little heat out. I am filling up on a lot of sugar. These actually I find work pretty well for hiking. And I'm enjoying the views of Phoenix. So you can actually see Phoenix right up there. And then this is all the Tonto National Forest, and we're in the Superstition Wilderness right now. So far the trail really hasn't been bad. The first part of it was pretty wide. It is rocky, so if you have hiking poles, that would really help. It's starting to get a little more narrow and a little steeper. According to All Trails, I have gone 1.5 miles and only 880 feet of elevation, which means we're looking at about 14, did I do the math there right? Yeah, 1,400 feet of elevation in the next mile. So mile and a quarter roughly. So it's gonna get pretty steep coming up here. If you wanna know where we are headed to the top of Flatiron. It used to be called Shiprock because it looks like the front of a ship, but they renamed it to Flatiron. I'm not quite sure why. A little tidbit of information the ranger gave me, but we are heading on up into there. So it's gonna get pretty steep pretty quick. Let's get going and see how this is gonna go. So another thing to note and keep in mind is that I left at 1. It gets dark around 6. So that is 5 hours to complete the hike. So I need to be up to the top and turn around in about 2.5 hours to make sure I'm down to the bottom before dark. I do have a headlamp just in case, but I really don't want to get stuck out here in the dark. So it is something I'm going to keep an eye on. And the wind is messing around my cord here, man. I took a half day from work and I'm doing this trail in the afternoon. I'm gonna say I need to be to the top by 3:30. Otherwise at 3:30, I will reevaluate where I am and see if it's worth turning around at that point or not. It is definitely getting steeper. I don't know if you can tell in the video how steep this is. I would, if I was a good vlogger, put the camera here, walk up that so you can see how steep it is, then come back down, pick up my camera and redo it. But I'm too tired for that. So you're just gonna have to visualize how steep this is. So we'll keep heading on up now. All right, if you wanna see where we are headed, I don't know if you can see them in the photo, but there are people right there. So I'm assuming we're gonna come up along here, hit that, and then eventually we have to get to the top of that. All right, here we are on break number 2. Hopefully the camera isn't too crooked because you're resting on a rock right now. But we are an hour and 15 into the hike, 2 miles in, and 1,500 feet elevation gain. So we've got about 700 more feet to go and about a half mile. So from here, it is all the way up. I'm gonna check on 2 things while I'm here. The first is Jasper. So I actually still do have a cell phone signal here. And I can see that he's standing up, staring out the window, but everything is still fine. The other thing I'm going to check is my water supply. So I brought 2.5 liters with me, but I want to make sure that I have enough still to get to the top. Oh yeah, I got most of it left. So we are good there. So I'm gonna hang out for a little bit, get my heart rate back to normal, and then we'll keep on heading up. Can you see the mountain sheep over there? I don't know if you can see him. He's right above this bush, so right about there. All right, I came from down there. You can see the people down there. And now this is the trail right here. We're kind of going up through one of the cracks. This trail got really hard. So there's a big open face, rock face that you have to climb through. And I do have a fear of heights, and my fear of heights was definitely kicking in on that. So it took me a while. Thankfully I ran into a family and they had a couple of young kids with them, and I asked them if this was the easiest way up. They actually told me of a better trail off to the right hand side of that face, which was a little bit easier, but it still took me about half an hour to get up that, because there were a few times I had to stop, calm myself down because of my fear of heights, and then keep going. So hopefully this trail gets a little less scary going up. We still have to go up through here, around there, and then up to the top. But right now at least you'll see it's kind of a trail. It's not like you're rock climbing at this point. You can actually walk. So let's keep going. I think this is the way I'm gonna go. Oh! All right, we made it to the wall. This is what they call the wall. And the top of the trail is up there. But my legs are way too tired. They are shaking. So even though I am that close to the end, I am calling it here and I'm heading back down because I don't want to risk hurting myself. You actually crawl up through here and then across and up. So unfortunately, I am here almost at the end, but I'm going to call it. But the views from even here are gorgeous, so I'm going to enjoy them and then head back down. As long as we make it down to the trail, then I'm good with sunset. Doing okay? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the goal is going to be to get past that rock face before the sun goes down. So we've got about an hour. There you are, yeah, I cut to the right. Yep. Welcome back, everybody. You will see that I am back home already and we're not on the trail anymore. So when I was climbing back down the mountain, I actually put the GoPro in the pocket of my backpack and it started recording. It recorded a 35-minute video of my pocket and the battery died. So I wasn't able to finish videoing anything. Also, things got a little intense, so I wouldn't have filmed anyway. So let me fill you in on what actually happened. On my way up the Flatiron Trail, about a half of the way up through the rock section, I ran into another solo female hiker. She and I were both struggling with making sure we were staying on the trail because it was extremely hard to find, and we decided we would finish hiking up together and really help each other through it. So she and I made it to the top. We got to the top of the mountain by 4 o'clock, which is later than originally I wanted to turn around, but not by much. It was still within that buffer of where if I had turned around at 4 o'clock and gotten back down, I would have made it out before the sun set. But when we got up to the top to that wall section, she did decide to go up and was assisted up by another hiker. I stayed down there with her backpack and I told her I would wait for her. She ended up taking some pictures and coming back a really short time later, but she got stuck on top of the wall. She was having a really hard time figuring out how to get her footholds and come down off the wall. She sat up there for probably a good 20 minutes. And then another couple that we had ended up climbing part of the way up the mountain with knew a easier way down the left-hand side. So they went down there. The girl I was with ended up following and got down that way. It still took her several minutes to come down that way because there was one section where you kind of had to take a leap of faith and slide down the rock a little bit. By the time she got back to me and we started heading back down the mountain, it was probably 5 o'clock at that point, which was much later than I wanted to start descending. But at the same point, she didn't have any sort of headlamp. She did not have a GPS, and her shoes were not hiking shoes. They were a canvas type shoe. So I didn't want to just leave her and say, I'm heading back down the mountain, good luck getting down. I wanted to make sure I stayed with her and was able to get her off the mountain. It was an extremely rocky trail, as you saw, so you still had to very carefully step down. Problem was, at this point, her feet, I don't know if they were swollen, if she had blisters, but those improper shoes were really causing her feet to be in a lot of pain. Her legs were also starting to shake, and she couldn't put weight on them consistently without having her legs start to give out under her. So her progress down the mountain was extremely slow going. At that point, I kept mentioning and encouraging that we really needed to get off the rock section of the mountain, which was about 3/4 to a mile worth of hiking before the sun set. At the same point, I didn't want to rush her because you don't want to rush somebody and then have them slip, fall, and hurt themselves either. So it was a really hard balance trying to know exactly what to encourage her to do. Thankfully, we got through that upper section where it's a really narrow trail and big boulders, and we got down to the end of that before the sun started setting. With that said, we still had about a half a mile of rock area to get down. At this point, the sun's going down to the point where I could still see the trail enough to navigate without a light, but she wasn't able to anymore, so I gave her the one headlamp that I was carrying, and we continued down. Since she had the headlamp on, having that extra light would kind of mess with my vision, so I went ahead a little bit to make sure that I could still get down the rock area with just the natural light from the horizon, and she followed behind. It was easy to lose the trail on the way up because there were actually a few times that we got off trail, but it was to the point where you got off trail, it got really hard, so you would just turn around, get back on, and go. But in the dark, it's a completely different story. You get off trail, the GPS tells you where you should be, but with the canyon walls on either side, the phone GPS is not the most accurate. So I'd pull up the map and the little blue dot on there would start bouncing around. So you would have a general idea of where you were, but it wasn't specific enough that I could actually see where the trail was. So it was very hard to navigate. We kind of had to go by feel / looking at the map / just heading straight down the mountain. At this point, the sun was still just slightly at the horizon to the point where you could kind of navigate with your own eyes, but we only had about 20 minutes until it was really dark. We were hiking just by the one headlamp, and we did get off trail and we got into the siphon draw, which is a wash. Washes are really easy to follow because it's the dried up riverbed, it's full of rocks, you know you're in the wash, but the problem is it's not maintained, it's not groomed. So at some points you were in a loose gravel trying to walk, at other points there were big boulders that you would have to sit on and try to like slide and scooch over. So going down the wash was going to be extremely slow moving, and with how much pain she was in with her legs and feet, it was not something we could do. That is when I started to get really nervous. I wouldn't necessarily say we were lost because we knew where we were. If we followed that wash, we would get down, but we were off trail. The main trail was over to the right-hand side. Problem was there was a good rock wall between us, and it wasn't something that we were going to climb up over in the dark. My GPS was on my phone. I only had 20% battery left. Her phone was down to 10% battery, and we only had the one headlamp, which I didn't have any spare batteries. So if that headlamp started going, we were going to be completely out of light. And we couldn't use the lights on our cell phones because that will drain your battery really fast. At that point, thankfully, we had cell phone signal. So I tried calling the ranger station, but it was 7:45 and nobody picked up. So I text my boyfriend and I explained to him we were stuck in the siphon draw wash. We were trying to get over to the trail, but we only had one headlamp and we were getting low on battery power. And I asked him to continue to try to call the ranger station for us while we hiked down. He wasn't able to get a hold of the ranger station, and they encourage you to call 911 if they aren't there to pick up. So he texted me and asked me if I wanted him to call 911. I told him to hold off, give me 10 minutes, see if we could find the trail, and then I would give him a status update. That little bit of a lifeline to a communication really helped to calm me down because I knew we could at least get help if we weren't going to be able to make it back to the trail. Thankfully, at that point, there was a break in the rock to our right-hand side, and there was a game trail through the bushes. They were spiny bushes, so I do have scratches up my arm. She got a pretty good gash in her hand, but compared to what could happen, that was nothing. So we ended up following the game trail. It weaved up through the rocks, and then we hit the main trail. At that point, it was surrounded by bushes. It was a lot easier to follow. So I texted my boyfriend back. I said, we're on the trail. I will give you a status update every 10-20 minutes. Don't call anybody yet. We continued on down that trail, and the GPS was still bouncing all around, but at least I had the red line from the hike of us going up. So I could look at it and say, okay, coming up is a left-hand turn. So then when the dirt trail was going and it seemed to almost veer off two ways, I knew we would have to go to the left. We ended up making it back to the main wide desert trail. Just knowing we were able to get off the mountain was an absolutely huge relief. At that point, even if we lost the headlamp, you can see the campsites and everything off in the distance with light, we could have stumbled through the dark and gotten home. So at that point, we were kind of home free, although we still had over a mile to hike. Her feet were so bad that she was in extreme pain. So that last mile took us about 30 to 40 minutes to walk. Finally, we got back to the trailer, to the base camp. I was able to see Jasper and Napoleon. All in all, it was a massive learning experience for everybody. From my perspective, I wanted to give you some of the things that I'm taking out of this hike that I will do going forward to make sure that I can be as safe as possible. So first, in my day pack that I carry, that thing is packed full. And many times I think that I overdo it with carrying all that stuff, but no matter what kind of hike you're going into, make sure you're prepared. This was only a 2.5 mile hike up, but the conditions, the climbing and scrambling up the rocks and leaving later in the day were items that made it something that I'm really thankful I carried all of that equipment for. I will be adding a second headlamp into that backpack going forward. That way, if this scenario ever happens again, I will have a headlamp for both myself and somebody else. But also, if I'm ever in the situation by myself, I will have a headlamp plus a backup, just in case the first one goes out. The other thing that I personally am going to do is my Garmin InReach is something that I always have clipped to the back of my backpack. I carry it with me for the SOS satellite communication, so in the event that I injure myself, I can either text for help if there is no signal, or I can call the SOS and have emergency services sent in. I really never use it as a GPS, and I rely on my phone for the GPS. However, in this situation, the GPS on my phone had drained my battery and I was down to 20%. If we had lost that map, especially when we were further up the mountain, we would have been in a lot more trouble. So with the Garmin, you can upload maps of the trail and do all that. Honestly, that's a lot of work, and I'm really not ever going to do that for a short hike like this one. I usually do it for the longer hikes, but you can set a pin of where you start, and then you just set navigate mode. And that will track your trail going up the mountain, and then it will help you navigate back to your pin. So from now on, whenever I go on a hike, I'm going to end up pinning either my truck or the base camp, and that way I can make sure I always have 2 GPSs to get back to where I was going. From running into this girl, there are a few things that I would recommend just learning from her. First, always make sure you have proper footwear. Sometimes, again, I feel a little over-prepared because I wear my really nice Vask hiking boots when I go on these short hikes. But on a hike like this, those hiking boots made a world of a difference. As we were going down the steep hill, she kept complaining that her feet were sliding into the front of her shoes, so her toes were all rubbed raw and sore. If you have proper footwear, your feet aren't going to be sliding around like that. You're also going to get a much better grip and much better support. So even if you think it's a short hike, don't underestimate it and wear the proper footwear. The other thing is know your limitations. When we got to that upper wall, I knew that if I really put my mind to it, I could have climbed up, especially having other hikers there who were helping heave people up over that wall. But I just didn't feel right about it. I am scared of heights, and those things can freak me out. For her, with her feet and her legs, her limit may have been much further down on the trail, and it would have actually required stopping maybe halfway, 3/4 of the way and turning back around. There's no shame in turning back around. Hiking can be really hard, so even if you see somebody blowing by you, know your limits and don't base your limits off what you see other people doing. I am put to shame constantly by other hikers, even though I'm out in the wilderness quite often. I can clearly remember a hike I did in Big Bend National Park, and I was huffing and puffing going up the trail, and this woman passes me hiking along. She stopped to talk. She had just gotten a knee or hip replacement, I can't remember, done. She was telling us how she felt like $1 million, and she kept on going. And you know what? She was older than me, but she was in better shape and she had a new hip. So keeping up with her pace, I knew I couldn't do it and I kept at my own pace. So you never know where their limits are versus your limits. You really need to know your own limits and stick to them. And if you end up turning around, you'll know what to expect next time. You can better prepare for it and you can come back and tackle that mountain again in the future. And the final thing that I would recommend is make sure you bring a headlamp. So you might not expect to be stuck out in the dark, but you never know if something like this is going to happen. You also never know if an injury or something like that comes up and you might get stuck. That is my first vlogging hike. Didn't expect it to be that kind of an adventure, but if you have any questions or comments on the whole experience, feel free to comment below. I am going to do a lot more hiking this summer and I'll be curious to see what happens and how I change what is in my day pack. And then I will do a video down the road of everything I carry along with me. Hopefully my learning experience can keep you guys safe on a future hike of yours. So thanks everybody for watching and we'll see you next time.